The winter of 1971 had gripped the Indian subcontinent as war raged between India and Pakistan. The air was thick with the sounds of artillery, planes, and boots marching across the muddy fields of East Pakistan, soon to become Bangladesh. It was a war for liberation, a fight for the oppressed, and amidst this turmoil, the fierce Gorkha regiment of the Indian Army was carving a legend of its own. The Gorkhas had long earned a reputation as some of the world's bravest and most tenacious warriors. Hailing from the hills of Nepal, these soldiers were famed for their loyalty, indomitable spirit, and the deadly kukri knives they carried, blades that struck terror into the hearts of their enemies. Among the Pakistani forces, the whisper of the Gorkhas' arrival was enough to unnerve even the most seasoned of battalions. Little did anyone know, an accidental report by the BBC would turn this fear into a historic and improbable victory. In early December, a battalion of the Gorkha regiment, just 750 men strong, was tasked with securing Akram, a strategic area near Sylhet. Sylhet was heavily fortified, and Pakistani forces in the region were well prepared to hold their ground. The Gorkhas, however, faced severe challenges. Artillery support was limited, food supplies were dwindling, and the terrain was unforgiving. Yet, undeterred, the soldiers marched forward, their resolve unshaken and their kukris sharpened for the battle ahead. As the Gorkhas advanced, BBC war correspondents, who often embedded themselves with Indian troops, closely followed the developments. These correspondents were tasked with relaying war updates to the world, reporting on battles, movements, and outcomes. In the chaos of war, one such report would soon change the course of history. While covering the Indian Army's operations near Sylhet, a BBC correspondent observed the Gorkha battalion in action. Inspired by their ferocity and the sheer determination with which they pushed forward, the correspondent filed a hurried report. Whether it was fatigue, miscommunication, or simple human error, the report erroneously stated that a brigade of Gorkhas had landed in Sylhet. In military terms, a brigade typically consists of at least 2,000 soldiers, far larger than the 750 Gorkhas actually on the ground. By the time the report was broadcast, the news had spread like wildfire. Pakistani forces in the Sylhet sector, already jittery from the thought of facing the legendary Gorkhas, now believed they were up against an overwhelming force. Panic began to set in. When word of the BBC's report reached the Indian Army's command, they immediately saw an opportunity. Instead of correcting the misinformation, they decided to exploit it. The Gorkha battalion, acting on clever orders, began to maneuver in a way that reinforced the illusion of a brigade. They split into smaller units, lighting multiple campfires at night to give the impression of a larger presence. Simultaneously, radio communications and troop movements were deliberately exaggerated. Pakistani troops, unaware of the actual strength of their enemy, were already demoralized by the reputation of the Gorkhas. A brigade's worth of these fearsome soldiers seemed an insurmountable force. With each passing day, as the Gorkhas continued their relentless attacks and strategic harassment, Pakistani morale plummeted further. The psychological warfare, combined with the tenacity of the Gorkhas, soon bore fruit. After suffering losses in skirmishes and under the constant fear of annihilation, the Pakistani forces near Sylhet began sending out feelers for surrender. The Indian commanders, though surprised by the speed of events, knew they couldn't immediately accept the offer. With just 750 men on the ground, the bluff would be exposed the moment a formal surrender commenced. Reinforcements were desperately needed. For days, the Gorkhas held their ground, maintaining the illusion of overwhelming strength while reinforcements from other Indian units rushed to Sylhet. Finally, when enough troops had arrived to make the numbers believable, the Indian Army formally accepted the Pakistani surrender. What followed was nothing short of historic. 2 Pakistani brigades, comprising nearly 7,000 troops, 3 brigadiers, a colonel, 107 officers, and 219 junior commissioned officers, JCOs, laid down their arms. They surrendered not to an entire brigade, but to a single, undersupplied Gorkha battalion of just 750 men. News of the Sylhet surrender quickly spread, becoming one of the most astonishing episodes of the 1971 war. The Indian Army's clever use of misinformation, coupled with the legendary courage of the Gorkhas, had delivered a victory that defied all conventional military logic. The Gorkha regiment's role in this triumph further solidified their reputation as warriors without equal. For the Pakistani forces, the mere thought of the Gorkhas, multiplied by the BBC's fateful error, had been enough to trigger surrender. It was a testament to the power of fear, perception, and psychological warfare. In the years that followed, historians and military strategists would marvel at the events near Sylhet. The reporting mistake by the BBC, unintended as it was, had played a pivotal role in a moment of war that would be remembered for generations. The story of how 750 Gorkhas outwitted and defeated 7,000 Pakistani troops became a part of military folklore, told and retold as an example of ingenuity, bravery, and the indomitable spirit of the Gorkha soldiers. And so, the legend grew: where the Gorkhas march, victory is not far behind, even if it takes a little help from an accidental news report.